Hello, Adab, Namaste, Sashika. Welcome to the fifth episode of Jammu Dogra Identity. Today we are talking about the Begar system, labor history. Are you guys still interested in labor history? The last time I heard about it was from Professor Irfan Habib. He's a famous historian of the Mughal dynasty, and he famously argued that the policies adopted by the Mughals for taxation of peasants were really oppressive, and that led to revolts under Mughal rule. And it's a very interesting observation from his part. And I revisited his work, and he also explores like the caste system among zamindars. Zamindars were like the petty landlords who managed land under Mughals and sometimes also sold the land to the British, but their control over the land was determined by their control over their kinship. So if they had like a good control of the violence, then they can ensure that the peasants do their labor according to the best taxation possible or the most profitable crop possible under the globalization drive of the British. So like if they thought this crop was more profitable, then the zamindars will enforce their kinsmen of their caste to plant said crop and then generate revenue that way. But as Irfan Habib showed in his work, people did not appreciate that. So in Kashmir / Jammu, the interesting thing was that it was not Muslim zamindars, it was the Dogra Hindu rulers who actually enforced the system of forced labor among Muslims. So the word rare is like relevant to the scholarly works that are available about labor in colonial or pre-colonial India. The data is still quite spotty, so please don't leave harsh comments about this thing. And I found a paper called A Bonded Labor During the Dogra Era in Kashmir and Its Impact, published in 2017 by Tausif Shaban, Shahnawaz Ahmed Dar, and R. Bardwaj, Government PG College, Madhya Pradesh, and Shivaji University, Gwalior. It's very well written, so I'll just read a little bit. The Dogra Raj in Kashmir during 1846 brought different policies and practices that were unfavorable to the interests of the masses and the producing class in particular. Apart from a regressive taxation policy, Begar, or forced come unpaid labor, was one of the most notorious systems of oppression that the Dogra rulers imposed on Kashmiris. They were compelled to work under extreme conditions for longer periods of time without basic facilities. Accumulated debt, retention of identity papers, or threats of denunciation to immigration were the means to impose the bonded labor to the people with alarming situations that were forced on them. This system was introduced by Sikhs and were taken to its extremes by the Dogras. The system assumed extremely dreadful proportions in Kashmir Valley under the early Dogras, mainly because of the frontier wars for conquest and consequent necessity of providing the troops on the move, as well as the huge military establishments in the subjugated territories with ample supplies. The system of Begar introduced by the Afghans was revived by the Sikhs, and during the Dogra rule, the peasants were not only robbed of the major portion of the produce, but the peasant was also subject to inhumane tyranny. Though the horror of Gilgit Begar was no more thereafter the construction of Gilgit Road, Begar was partially abolished by the government in 1891 and fully in 1920. It took different forms. Because of medieval means of communication, overall technological underdevelopment, the prevalence of feudal expenditure pattern of the state, and the consequent meager resources at the disposal of the government, the problem of raising labor power for carriage and construction purposes on nominal wages formed a critical feature of the Dogra administration. And then they named it government work, which was like a euphemism for forced labor. It reminded me of the film Kedarnath, in which we have like a Muslim laborer carrying the heroine to visit the shrine Kedarnath. And nowadays, I see people mostly like enjoying the trek, but it's just like a very huge contrast to how Kedarnath is supposedly a love story between two willing individuals, but like it's set in this context where how do you even ask someone to form consent to your relationship if he's a forced laborer to begin with? I'm not quite sure, like, if that film makes it clear that he has the agency or not. But yeah, I haven't finished the film, so I don't really know how he dies. So it's just a digression. The paper details how the state economy is affected under such irregular use of human labor. So when there's war, people cannot cultivate the land. And sometimes they also resort to bribing the officials. And the officials get used to this kind of bribes, and they often take like whatever they want from the agriculture, like milk, eggs, etc. And even one British person was shocked when he saw this. He wrote, "It is true that we sold Kashmir to late Gulab Singh, but we surely did not float its people into slavery. And we have no doubt that in the worst days of slave trade, the conditions of Negroes of the West India sugar and cotton plantations and of the southern states of America were very much better than a lot of Kashmir has been and still seems to be. But be this as it may, the Maharaja is our feudatory, and we are morally, if not politically, responsible for the grave evils arising from the barbarous system of misgovernment in Kashmir." Thanks, y'all, for listening to the fifth episode. And maybe you can draw some parallels with current events today, because many people also labor in the conflict zones that is being reported in the news.